Hi, I'm Vera.
And I'm Sloedi Spaghetti.
We like to go on cycling trips.
And we've been doing this for over a dozen years, always taking a lot of pictures.
So that when we're old and have to trade in our beloved bicycles for one of these walking aid thingies to get around, we still have the chance to re-experience the routes we took and the many places we've seen.
Thankfully, we haven't reached that age yet. And until then, we thought it might be a good idea to make a video out of our slides, giving us good reason to review them and share our experiences with a wider audience.
I think that means you. So I'd like to invite you to join us on our walk, or rather ride, down memory lane. Apart from showing you what we discovered, I can also tell you what we learned and maybe even inspire and encourage you to try traveling by bike yourself.
This is a presentation of the very first trip we took.
It was to celebrate the 5th time we traveled to one of our favorite spots on this planet in the south of France.
Previously, we had always used a car to get there, but this time we wanted to cycle.
The distance we traveled would have been about 800 kilometers, but of course that would have taken us forever. So we covered the first half to Geneva by train and cycled the remaining 400 through France, which took us 5 days.
It was quite an adventure, especially as we had no experience of long-distance cycling at all.
Which meant that we had made a lot of mistakes.
Oh yes, we certainly did. But not only that, it was another world then.
Yeah, so much has changed.
For example, preparing for our trip was much more difficult as we didn't possess a smartphone and couldn't use that to navigate.
So we had to resort to this, which of course wasn't much help, as an atlas doesn't provide much detail.
Yeah, let's get rid of this. Don't need that anymore, thank God. And the Rhone River guided our way, thankfully, and the French roads are usually well signed, so apart from once, we didn't get lost.
Another thing that has changed is the infrastructure.
This route is now a lot easier as a long continuous cycle highway has been installed down the Rhone Valley, which has become very popular and is now an official EuroVelo route, number 17 to be precise.
But in 2012 they hadn't made much progress. So apart from a few short sections, we had to stick mostly to main roads and endure heavy traffic.
Yes, that was right. And back then we got into dire situations that wouldn't happen to us anymore now, as we are far more experienced. But we'll get further into that as we look at the pictures.
Another major thing that has changed is the possibility of accessing information about campsites and hotels.
Yeah, we used to have to rely on signs or even going into the tourist information centres to find out where we could set up for the night.
Now you just check your app like camping.info or booking.com. So this picture leaves a lot to be explained. We're changing trains here at the main train station in Zurich. As you can see, we had a stupid amount of gear with us. But I must point out that we had the 3 weeks we wanted to stay at our destination in mind when we packed.
So I pulled a trailer full of camping equipment that would have normally just gone into a car's boot. You know, like this. A table and chairs, a cool box, multiple stoves, and a complete set of tools, never mind all the clothes, tent, mattresses, and sleeping bags. I can assure you that this was the last trip I made dragging a trailer behind me. It was traumatizing to the point that whenever I see anyone traveling like this now, it gives me the shivers and makes my legs feel heavy. Not only is it ridiculously impractical, as you will see later, but you also feel each and every and even the slightest elevation on the road, and getting up steep hills is an unnecessary challenge. So I strongly recommend not making this mistake. As I later found out, front panel bags are a much better solution, even if that means going without your own dining room table and chairs. Another thing I did without on later trips was this hideous safety vest. I thought it might be a good idea whilst treading unknown territory to make myself more visible. In fact, I was expecting it to be a dangerous and intimidating experience, with unruly and potentially bloodthirsty drivers attacking me from all directions. But in retrospect, I found out that was probably more down to my chauvinist bigotry about foreign countries, that we commonly get indoctrinated with.
Yes, that is very common. Like when you see the Dutch cycle tourists in foreign countries with a helmet on, something they would never do in the Netherlands.
Just goes to show how prejudice manifests in all sorts of ways and how our mindset leads us to make false presumptions. And this reflective vest was more reflective of what I was expecting, but thankfully wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, I would say that 95% of drivers are cautious, regardless of what country you are in. But I think we're a bit off topic now. Maybe we could talk about that in a future video. Mind you, with all the stuff in your trailer potentially falling off at any given moment, cars kept that distance anyway.
Yeah, that's true. There was actually a small advantage to that trailer I despised. We're leaving Geneva here, heading west. The Rhone River cuts into the mountains and forms a deep, narrow canyon which leads you cycling up and down the mountain until you arrive in Cèze, where our itinerary joined up with the river itself.
The pictures are really random, because we just took pictures every 10 kilometers. After all, the theme wasn't tourist attractions, but just random impressions of our journey and weird things we saw, like this door which seems to be missing steps.
This is the first bit of the cycle highway we encountered. Little did we know at the time that this was part of the ViaRhôna, never mind the EuroVelo 17.
The following day, when we asked for information on a place to stay at the tourist office, we were asked if we were doing this ViaRhôna. And we were handed this sort of book of 27 leaflets containing a summary and a description of the route, divided into 26 sections.
Oh my god. Which looked a bit like this. Yeah, very fiddly. So you see this, oh my god, this seemed all rather complicated. So we stuck to a plan of riding to our destination on the left side of the river and following the right side for our way back. And apart from that, we didn't encounter many signs giving directions to the route, so we didn't really bother much about it. Fast forward to today, the route is almost complete, with just a short section missing south of Lyon.
Here is an example of the situation of the ViaRhôna back then, where you still had to negotiate roads with heavy traffic.
But then also continuing on this wide and traffic-free track, which left us quite impressed. It was a shame that it didn't go very far.
The cycle path was completely deserted. We didn't come across any other cyclists. That has changed a lot, and nowadays there are many bicycles going up and down the path, especially in the summer month. A picture like this wouldn't be possible anymore.
When you're cycling, you get to see all sorts of things on the way, not just animals. Things you may not be familiar with or see frequently, like these weird round boats. Or an amphicar. It was produced in the 1960s. I don't think anything like this is even made anymore. Looking at them, I wondered if they had bought it when they were young. Looks like they're enjoying the ride at least.
Small shops in stone buildings are still very common in France.
And so are atomic power stations.
We're approaching Lyon here as the Rhone leaves the Alps and the landscape flattens out.
This is on the outskirts of Lyon. Lyon is the third most populous city in France, and its metropolitan area is home to 2.3 million people, although you don't see much urbanity here. We caught up with a bit of the ViaRhôna, which was already finalised and signposted, but missed the sign and got lost in the suburbs. I guess we must have looked a bit out of place on our loaded bikes, as a man approached us and kindly gave us directions without us even having to ask.
Lyon is actually quite a nice city, with a historic centre, but as we had already visited it on previous occasions, we didn't stop but rather continued along an easy-to-cycle pathway directly along the river. Crossing through Lyon was simple, but getting out of the city, heading south, was rather nerve-wracking and not exactly what you might call scenic.
We were in a bit of a fret about where to spend the night. We had spent the 2 nights before at campsites, but in this heavily industrialised region there wasn't any in sight. And even if there would have been one, the surroundings wouldn't have allowed for a peaceful rest. So we ended up staying in a motel with this lovely view.
We didn't want to leave the bikes outdoors and unguarded all night, so we crammed them into our tiny bedroom and got side looks from the truck drivers staying there as we heaved them up 3 stories. We secured the trailer in the backyard and hoped for the best.
The next day, as we continued, we made it south of Valence, about 130 kilometres to Lyon-sur-Drôme. We found further completed sections of the ViaRhôna, but not before we had left the suburbs. This is the last picture we took heading into Valence, a city with a population of 130,000, counting in the urban surroundings.
After cycling 4 days straight, we were starting to feel very tired and we were looking forward to setting up camp. I was convinced that there was a campsite in the area, but we looked around and asked people and couldn't find it anywhere. And we ended up getting into an argument.
Yes, I remember.
Before finally finding a hotel with a vacancy, which probably took us another hour, I think.
Yeah.
It was dusk by the time we arrived there. We were so tired, we even skipped dinner and had a really long lie-in, pushing the start of the next day well towards lunchtime. This muddled us up a bit time-wise, as we really wanted to reach our destination by the evening. So we didn't take any further pictures, but rather cycled 90 kilometers without stopping, leaving the Rhone Valley and heading up into the Cevennes Mountains. We arrived there hot and thirsty, but ever so proud of ourselves for having accomplished this journey on a bicycle.
Here are some impressions of where we spent the following 3 weeks. A wonderful and very natural environment on the Cèze River, just lounging about and doing nothing. There are several campsites along the riverbanks that you can visit if you like, but only if you enjoy skinny dipping. Like I said, it is a very natural environment.
Our stay at the Cèze had eventually come to an end, and it was time to say goodbye, not without shedding a tear whilst departing for Geneva, And yet we were excited to discover whatever we would see on the other side of the Rhone whilst cycling back.
Cruas is a sweet medieval village located south of Valence. The picturesque scene of the village nestled on the hillside is in stark contrast to the cooling towers of the nearby nuclear power station. Whether the huge but rather faded illustration of a young child enjoying a day at the beach that covers its eastern flank has a specific history, or whether it was just painted in a feeble attempt to make the intimidating structure more aesthetic, or even to distract from the potential risk of a meltdown, is beyond me. But it is rather peculiar, as I have never come across any other cooling tower displaying such mind-boggling art. By the way, if you want to know more about why cooling towers are shaped like this, check out this video. You can find the link in the description below.
The Rhone River used to be an extremely important transport route, connecting Lyon and many regions further north with the port of Marseille and the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, most goods are now hauled on the motorway, and unlike the Rhine, the Rhone has lost much of its purpose. However, some bulk goods still float the waters. Here we caught a barge crossing a tourist boat, basically a floating hotel, which you more commonly see anchored at one of the ports during the daytime.
Don't ask me why we took this picture, but we had a bit of a laugh as we looked at it whilst making this video, wondering if Trump's MAGA movement was inspired by a French furniture retailer.
Time for a rest in the city centre of Valence. After that, we paid more attention to the ViaRhôna pamphlet we had been given, as it promised more brand new sections of dedicated cyclepaths, or as the French call them, voies vertes, or greenways. And we weren't disappointed as we rolled along the smooth surface and embraced the tranquility of a car-free environment.
This sweet creature paid us a visit at our tent whilst we were setting up for the night. Isn't it just adorable?
And it wasn't shy at all.
Oh yes, I preferred the picture of the rabbit. Let's continue.
Not all the things you encounter on the way are particularly pretty to look at. As we progressed towards Lyon, heavy industry took turns with lush greenery and historic buildings, making for a very eventful journey.
We had a difficult time finding accommodation in Lyon and ended up in a very full campsite, which was due to some large sports event or whatever, which had took place that weekend. This left us rather frustrated, as we could barely fit our tent into the space we had been allocated, and to top it off, we had to put up our tent in the middle of a downpour, But in return, we witnessed this wonderful double rainbow, leaving us content with the day.
Bakeries are certainly an important part of French culture, beautifully demonstrated by the disciplined queue in front of the entrance patiently awaiting freshly baked croissants and baguettes. Oh look! There's you, ready to refuel our stomachs before heading into the city.
Here we can see construction work on the Musée des Confluences. A confluence is also an English term borrowed from French, meaning the convergence or merging of two rivers. The name of the museum roots in the fact that the building was built exactly where the Saône River, a wide navigable waterway, flows into the Rhone. And it is now a popular science centre and anthropology museum that opened 2 years later in 2014 and now looks like this.
Crossing Lyon was really easy and we were happily enjoying ourselves, paying close attention to the ViaRhôna signs as not to get lost, when without further warning our bliss was brutally interrupted by our path along the riverbank disappearing into thin air and being replaced by these monstrous steps.
This was no joke, but was actually the newly constructed and officially signposted cycle route. I mean, what were they thinking? We had gotten far enough for the day and stayed at a campsite situated on an island with a white water course for kayaks. After a long day, we unwound whilst watching the daredevils mastering the descents and having some schadenfreude whenever they were not quite so successful and crashing and capsizing. But Karma's a bitch and didn't seem to tolerate our malicious joy, as we would later find out. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself now.
Yeah, anyway, we certainly grew an appetite and we're looking forward to finding a good restaurant and set out in the village, only to have to return to the campsite hungry. All the restaurants we found were closed.
We managed to buy 2 ice creams at the campsite reception and woke up the next morning with an appetite for a horse.
Oh yes, but we had noticed there were a small shop in the village and were sure to be able to get a good bite for breakfast and stock up on provisions for the day. So we set out for that, only to discover that too was shut.
Slightly annoyed and with a thundering rumble in our stomach, we continued, keeping our eyes peeled for anything promising something to eat.
Which we ultimately found 3 hours and 45 kilometers down the road. Welcome to rural France.
These last pictures were taken in Bellegarde, about 40 kilometres west of Geneva, which had been host to the Tour de France that year. The cyclist above me giving a telltale sign of the past event. Hosting the Tour de France is a big deal for any town and is accompanied by celebrations, festivities and all sorts of art being displayed for public perception and recognition. Some of it wonderfully crafted, paying homage to the heroes on two wheels. Not that we relate to the glorification of a highly commercialised and not really environmentally friendly event, but it does reflect the intimate relationship French society has with its vélo. The cartoon you just saw described the adventures three friends had as they did a sightseeing tour of Bellegarde on their bikes. Unfortunately, there isn't quite the same amount of passion shown when it comes to infrastructure, as we discovered as we headed towards Geneva, but they are catching up and the cycling accommodations have dramatically improved in the past years.
Looking across the vineyard, you can just about make out the chateau or watershed in Geneva. So our journey had come to an end, leaving us with three main insights to think about in the train journey home. Number 1. Cycling long distance is really fun. This is definitely something we want to repeat.
Number 2, I will never cycle with a trailer again. Never, ever.
Number 3, make sure you have enough provisions. Spending a night followed by cycling half a day on an empty stomach isn't any fun. And one thing that amazes me is how much I remember from this trip. So, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button.
And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below and we will happily answer them.
It was really fun making this video, so we look forward to making another one on the next trip we did, when we cycled from Switzerland to England a year later.
To visit my grandmother. So, thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye. Did you catch that duck with the funky hairstyle?
You mean this one? Should I make an appointment at the hairdressers for you?
I think I'd have to wear a wig. But I wonder if the hairstyle is French haute couture.